Hello and welcome to Left-Handed Crochet Lady. For today's video, all you're going to need is a ball or skein of yarn and a hook. I matched the hook to the size of the yarn that we'll be using today, but this is just a beginner video. So for today's video, I'm just going to be doing a breakdown introductory to beginning a project. So a couple things that you want to notice. So I have the Big Twist Living brand, and I like this one because it's anti-pilling. So you'll see what I'm talking about when I use other brands. And I just really like the feel of this one. So when you're going to the store and you're trying to figure out what yarn to get, sometimes it can be kind of hard because there's so much to choose from. So a couple things that you want to look at is one, whether it's cost effective enough for you, or if you have the hooks for all of it, and what project you want to do. So thankfully there's a couple cheats that you can follow on your yarn product. So I got this from Joann's. I rarely order yarn online, but sometimes I will. It depends, but Big Twist is a pretty good bargain deal, and the Living brand is a great yarn. A couple of things that I'd like you to pay attention to when you're looking at this is, because we're doing crochet, which you can tell by the shape of this hook, there is the crochet numbers right here. And it says US 7/4.5. So normally what I do, you can also, it can also be called G, H, different letters, but normally this number will be on your crochet hook. So you want to look at that, and then you match that up with the number 4.5, 4.5. Perfect. The next thing you want to look at, it depends on the project that you want to do. So for a hat, this one calls for 1 skein of yarn or 1 ball of yarn. People call it different things. And then for an adult shirt, 5. For a 50-inch by 60-inch Afghan, 6. And for the scarf, 3 skeins of yarn. So it just depends on what you want to do. You can find a lot of different free patterns online. You can also find them on YouTube like you are now. And so some other things that you want to pay attention to when you're picking your yarn is these numbers right here. You don't need to pay a lot of attention to them, but depending on where you live, this can be important. So this one is 199 yards. So depending on how big your project is, sometimes you want to know how many yards you're getting per ball or per skein of yarn. And that can be helpful because when you're making a blanket, you're going to be using 1,000+ yards. So you would want quite a few. And that's more if you're making a bigger one than this. So sometimes it will say, 6 will get you a blanket, but really it's not that big. So you just want to make sure that you choose accordingly to what you actually want. So 199 yards. The reason I say this is important to pay attention to is because sometimes you'll find a really nice yarn that you love, and it will be way too few yards, but not enough yarn to actually do the project that you really want to. And so I've done this before. I've made this mistake, and hopefully you won't make it because I made it for you, is I will come home, I'll be working on a project, and it's only 68 yards of yarn. And normally that's when the yarn is a little bit thicker. There'll be less. And so I will start working on my project, and then halfway through I have to go back and I have to get more because I did not pay attention to the yards. So it's important to pay attention to the yards or the meters based on where you live. So getting started, so I take the wrapping off of my ball of yarn. I know that some of this may seem pretty rudimentary, but when you're a newcomer or you've never done this before, it's really helpful to know all of these tips just because it can be a little tricky. And I specifically am left-handed, and so I hope that I can help people, especially who are left-handed, starting out to do this. But if you're right-handed, you are more than welcome to follow along. You would just kind of switch things in your brain a little bit, kind of like a lot of us do left-handed. So a couple things. Sometimes people will push down their ball of yarn like this, and they will get the middle part of the skein out like this, and there's layers in there. So sometimes I will do that, but only if the end or the tail of the yarn is sticking out of the ball of yarn. So normally the end of the yarn is tucked in here. And so I'll just pull that out, and I normally just kind of work from unraveling it and giving myself more as I go through the project. But if you get lucky and you can find that middle part of the ball of yarn and pull it out and work from there, it makes your project go by a lot quicker, and it can be really helpful when you have a bigger project. So, but for today, we're just going to be doing some beginner stuff, so I don't mind doing it with that. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to learn how to chain on and to do a slip knot. Okay, so this can be really tricky when you're first learning, and I sometimes will see videos and people will be like, I could do that in 2 seconds, but here we go. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the yarn, you're going to cross it over. You kind of want to make it just like a loop, right? And you can pinch that in the middle. So then I'll kind of switch hands, and what I'll do is I'll pull the working yarn through like that to create a slip knot. Okay, the reason it's a slip knot is because you can slip right out of it. Super easy to do. So I'm going to tell you the difference between working yarn and the tail, okay? So the working yarn is the long part. It's the part that you're pulling the yarn from the ball into the work, right? So it's what you're working with, okay? And then the tail is going to be the end here, and sometimes you'll work the tail into your work, and we'll get to that in a later video. So for this, you can do the slip knot with or without your needle. You don't have to do it with the needle, but you can if you want to. It's up to you. So I normally just do it with my hand, but some people can do it with the needle, and I think they're a lot more talented. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna chain that loop that you just created onto the hook. And then there's a couple terms that are important to know. So yarn over. The way that I remember that is just because you're taking the yarn over the hook, okay? So to create a chain, what you're gonna do is you're going to yarn over and pull a loop onto your hook. Let me do that a couple times. This can be tricky sometimes. So you yarn over, and what you want to do is you want to pull the working yarn or the long yarn through this loop that's already on your hook, okay? I'll do that again. So yarn over, pull the working yarn through the loop on your hook, okay? I'm gonna do it a couple more times, and I'm gonna talk about how to hold the yarn when you do this. So I like to put my yarn over my finger and sometimes under my pinky. This is really just a preference. It's up to you. You can hold it however you want, but you're gonna want to be able to hold it with those hands so you can tell how much tension you're pulling on your work. That's another important thing to know. So you can hold your hook in a couple ways. You can hold it like this, like a pencil almost, like this, or you can hold it like kind of like sideways or like a knife. Those are kind of the two terms that are used. So I kind of like to hold mine sideways, but I use my hook a lot. And something I like to think about with my hook is that my hook is my friend. So my hook is something that is working with me, not against me. So when I'm talking about tension, when you first start off crocheting, I will be the first to admit that I held my stuff really tight because I was really nervous and it was hard to get used to. And so what we're gonna do is you're holding this, you yarn over, and then when you pull through, I pinch this part with the working yarn. I'm gonna show you again. I pinch that and I use my hook to pull through, okay? Do it a couple more times. Holding, pull through, okay? Yarn over, holding, pull through. Yarn over, pull through. Yarn over, pull through. So the way that I like to think about this is like I'm pulling to the left of my body. If you're right-handed, you're pulling to the right of your body. So you're pulling like almost like you literally using a knife to cut something, right? So use the hook as your friend. You're going to hook the working yarn onto the yarn and then you pull through. Okay, I'm gonna get a little closer to the camera just so you can see. Pull through, okay? Yarn over, pull through, okay? So for today, what I'd like you to chain is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so next we're going to get into the single crochet, okay? Okay, so now that you got your 14 chains on your hook, we're gonna learn the single crochet. So the single crochet is one of the most basic ones to learn. I would say it's kind of the beginner of the beginner. So this can sometimes be a little tricky. So what we're gonna do is we're going to work into the second loop, okay? So the loop that's on your hook does not count, it never counts. And then what you're gonna look for is these little like seashells. They're like a puka shell, right? They're shaped kind of like that. And you look at that, and that is a chain. So 1, 2. So we're gonna work into the second chain, okay? So what you do is you're going to insert your hook into the top of that shell. You're going to yarn over. You got really good at that last time. Pull through. You're going to yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, I'm gonna slow that down a little bit more. We're gonna do it again. We're gonna go into the second chain now. So we have 1 chain on the hook, or that we've worked already, okay? And then we have the loop on the hook, and we're going to work into that chain that's right here. So the way that you can kind of tell is this one's like already lifted, right? So it's up just a little bit more. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your hook, you're going to insert it into that top part of that shell. yarn over, pull through a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops. Okay? I'm going to do that a couple more times for you. So, a couple things to pay attention to with this one is when you yarn over, my work is in the back, right? So this is my working yarn, the long yarn, this is the tail, right? So you're not really working with the tail anymore, but this is also kind of the tail because it's attached. So I have my work in the back. So I'm going to put my hook into the top of that shell. I'm going to pull through, if I can get it, a loop, yarn over, pull through two. Okay? Not yarn over. Through, pull through, yarn over, pull through both. Okay? In, pull through one, so you have two loops on your hook, yarn over. It kind of looks like you're going backwards in this one, right? So you're gonna back, pull through two, pull through both of those loops, okay? So I'm gonna meet you back when we're at the end of this row. Okay, so now that you're at the end of the row, your work should be looking like this, kind of like a little rabbit tail. And the reason I had you meet me at the end of the row is because sometimes we can miss this chain, this last chain. We can also miss the first chain sometimes too. So when you're first starting, it can be kind of challenging to notice that. But the trick is looking for those shells, right? So you can see that there is a shell here, right? There's a shell. And what you're gonna do is you're just gonna put your last single crochet in there. Perfect. All right, so that is row one, okay? So today, we're not really going to be creating anything spectacular. This is just the basics of how to get some of these stitches down and how to start out when you're crocheting, which can be challenging. And when you look at the back, it looks a little bit different than the front. Very beautiful. Okay, so we're gonna go to row two. So for row two, what you're going to do is you're going to put your loop back onto your hook and you're going to chain one. Okay, so and then you're going to turn your work. So you do this every single time you start a new row. You're going to chain one and then turn your work. This is not going to be the same for every pattern that you follow, but before you turn your work, you're gonna wanna do the chain if it asks for it. Okay, so working into this, you can see these shells really well, okay? The one that's a little trickier to see is that last one again. But you should have a total of 14 shells all the way across with this chain one. We're gonna do the same stitch. We're gonna do a single crochet. So if you remember, it's in, yarn over, pull up two loops, yarn over, pull through two. Okay, I'm gonna do it a little slower. So when you're going into this row, it's a little bit more easy to notice your work because you're going to be pushing, I like to think of it as pushing, you're pushing the needle through these shells and you're going to be pushing it through both. So yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through two. Loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Perfect. And then I'll meet you at the end of this row again. Okay, so we're at the end of the row again. And again, this last one just can be kind of tricky to see, but you just look for the shell and you pop that last stitch in. Perfect. Okay, for row 3, once you're done with row 2, you can kind of see that you're starting to build something, which can be exciting when you're first starting out because you're recognizing that while you're doing all these crazy movements with your hands, you're actually doing something with them. So for this row, we're going to chain 2. So 1 and 2. Okay, and then you're going to turn your work. So for this row, we're going to do the half double crochet. So for the half double crochet, this again is one of those basic stitches that's fairly easy to learn. So you should have 15 shells all the way across with this chain 2, and you're going to be working into this chain here. So the third one, so 1, 2, and then 3. So to start this one out, you're going to yarn over, and then you're going to push into the shell, yarn over, pull up, and you're going to have 3 loops on your chain, on your hook. And then yarn over one more time, and you're going to pull through all 3 of those loops. Okay, I'm going to do that a little bit slower. So yarn over, push through that shell, yarn over, pull up another loop, so you have 3 loops, yarn over, and then pull through 1, 2, and then 3. So all 3 of them. And I did that really slow. So normally when you pull all of them through, it's not going to be that slow motion, and you can see on this one, it's a little bit different and the height is a little bit higher for half double crochet. And the reason that we chain 2 at the beginning is so we can get at that height. So yarn over, push through with that yarn over into the shell, pull through, you have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 3, yarn over, push through, pull up the 3rd loop, yarn over, pull through all. Okay, and then I'll meet you at the end of this row as well. Okay, so you're at the end of your row for your half double crochets. It's looking like this, very pretty. And then you're going to yarn over, you're going to find that last shell, and you can see there's a little loop here, so you want to just be careful to not grab that. You're going to push through, pull up your 3rd loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. Perfect. Okay, so before we turn our work again, you can look at your work, looking so good, and then you're going to chain 3 for this next one. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, again, so we're doing this to get the height. Okay, so then you turn your work, and for this one we're going to be doing the double crochet. So the double crochet is another very common stitch that you're going to learn how to do, and it's more in depth than the half double crochet because you're not going to be pulling through all of those loops all at the same time, but it's a similar concept. So what you're going to do for this one is you're going to work into that 4th chain right here. You can see it. Okay, so you have the 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay, so you should have 16 shells all the way across with these chain 3. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to yarn over. You're going to push through. yarn over, pull up. You're gonna have 3 loops on your chain, on your hook. I keep saying chain, and I mean hook. You're gonna yarn over, and you're going to pull through 2 loops. So you're gonna go through those first 2 loops, and then you're gonna have 2 loops on your hook, and then you're going to yarn over again, and you're going to pull those 2 through, okay? I'm gonna slow that one down because this one can be a little hard to remember. So let's try it again. So you're gonna yarn over your hook, push through, grab that yarn, pull up 3 loops, yarn over. You're gonna pull through the first 2 loops or the middle loops. That's another way you can think about it. So you're gonna go 1, 2, and then you're gonna just have these last 2 loops on your hook, and you're gonna yarn over and pull through both. Okay, we're gonna do that again. Yarn over, push through, grab that loop. You have 3 loops on your hook. 1, 2, 3. And I'm making it a little bit tighter because I didn't want it to be super loose. And then yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops, yarn over one more time, pull through those last 2, okay? So you can see that this one actually looks quite a bit different than the other ones we did because there's these little posts. That's kind of how I like to think of it, is that they're a post. Okay. So yarn over, pull through, have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through those 2 loops, 2 loops on your chain, and then pull through the rest, okay? So you have these post looking things going on, yarn over, push through, pull up 3 loops on your hook, pull through the 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through the last, okay? I'll meet you at the end of this row. All right, so we have all of those posts going on. You can see kind of the difference of everything now. You got your double crochet, your half double crochet, and then those 2 rows of single crochet. So for this last one, just yarn over, find that shell, push through, pull up, you have 3 loops, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through the rest. Perfect. So for this one, you're just going to chain 1, the next row we're about to do. And then you turn your work. So for this one, what I'm going to be teaching you is a slip stitch. So I'll put the terminology up in the corner. Slip stitch also has like a lot of abbreviations, so I'll put that as well so you know what that is when people talk about it. I really struggled to understand what a slip stitch was when I first started, and so hopefully this can help you. So this one is so incredibly simple, and all you're going to do is you're going to put your hook into the shell. You're going to pull a loop up onto your hook, and then you're going to pull that loop all the way through onto the next. Okay, I'll do that again. So you push through your shell, pull up a loop, and then you pull it all the way through, okay? Push through, yarn over, right? Pull up a loop, pull all the way through, okay? Okay. So this one is sometimes used to help create like ribbing effect or a different like textured effect in your project, because when you look at the back here, you can kind of see that it's like ridged a little bit. So I like this one when I'm doing back loop only stitches, which I will show you some of those here in a second. So you pull through, right? So you just put in, yarn over, pull that loop up, and then pull the loop all the way through. Super simple. So through the shell, all the way through. Okay? Through, pull up a loop, pull through, all the way. I'll slow it down on this next one. Pull all the way through. Okay? So then back loop only. This is another terminology that you'll see a lot of when you look at your patterns, and you can see for this slip stitch, what it's done is it's created the shells. They're here, right? They're kind of on the front now. And so it can create this really cool ribbing effect, but you also have shells up here too. They just look a little bit different now. So back loop only, slip stitch. This one also can be used to create a lot of really cool ribbing effects. And I'm just going to do it for the second half of this one. So back loop only. So when you look at your shell, I'm going to take that out. When you look at your shell, you can see that there's these two loops, right? So when you're going into the back loop only, if it's facing you, that's the front loop, and then that's the back loop, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're just gonna put your hook, you're gonna put the chain back on, and then you're just gonna go right into that back loop only, okay? You're gonna pull up a loop, and then you're gonna pull through, okay? Back loop only, pull up. It's the same exact concept, it's just gonna give you a little bit different of an effect. And then when we get to the end, you'll kind of see. So you can actually see already that it's kind of twisting, right? So it's more coming upwards. And then there's the ribbing that's happening right here on this little ridge. So it can look really pretty in some of the projects that we'll work on. Okay, and then because we chain that 3, it can be a little tricky, but there are 3 chains here. So I'm gonna go right into this one. You can see, it's kind of hard to see that one sometimes. And I'm just gonna pull through, back loop only. And then you are done. It looks a little funky because we went, part of it we did back loop only, and then the other part we just did a regular slip stitch. So you can see that the shells are a little bit different on this one. So the shells, you can see these ones on the front, and then you can see where I kind of switched, and then it gave you this ribbing effect like right here. Okay, so those are some of the basic stitches that you're normally going to learn and you're going to do in most of your projects. There are other terms and terminologies that I'll teach you along the way. When you are done with your work, because we're not going to be using this work, right, because it's mainly just a practice little rectangle that we made, what you're going to do is you're going to use your hook to pull through your yarn, and you're going to cut it, and you're going to pull it all the way through. So super, super, super easy to do when you're done. And I think, you know, sometimes we think it's really fancy, but then you weave your ends in, which we'll talk about in a later video. But thank you so much for joining me today with crochet. And I hope that you have learned some new things or new techniques or new terminologies that you can use in the future. And I look forward to crocheting with you later. Bye.